in a second. So if you want to start recording whenever you're ready, Ben.
Yep, all good.
Okay. Kia ora, everyone. My name's Justin Zanni. I'm a teacher at Otago Boys, and I've been involved with Earth and Space educators for a few years now, and we've been sorting out these webinars for term 1 from the Ministry of Education, and we'll just go around and introduce to a few of the other presenters as well. Jim, should we start with you maybe?
Sorry, Jim, I muted you.
Yeah.
That should be unmuted now. Is that all good? Sweet. So, yep, science teacher at Mount Maunganui College. Been teaching there for about 16 years now, and Earth and Space Science for probably 12 or 13 of those years. Short and sweet. Any more info?
Cool. Rachel, do you want to introduce yourself? Thanks, Jim.
Kia ora koutou. I'm called Rachel Chisnell Toko Ingoa. My name is Rachel Chisnell, and I'm an NCA implementation facilitator for the science learning area and also digital technologies. I'm based in Ōtepoti, Dunedin, and so I'm more than happy to support as I can or connect you to somebody more learned in various areas that can support you as needed. Kia ora.
Cool. Thank you, Rachel. Laura, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Laura Bennett was piloting from the start at One School Global, so we teach over Zoom all around the country, and I've been doing the Earth Space Facebook page, so I've got a bit to do with that too.
Thanks, Laura. And Raymond, did you want to say hello as well?
Hi, I'm Raymond Neal. I work at NZQA. I worked a bit with Justin and Laura last year on the pilot work, so just getting my head around that the standard and the various ones that we're looking at.
Cool. Thanks, Raymond. Okay, so I shall share my screen and we'll get the presentation started. Hopefully everybody's able to see that.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so what we're going to be doing today is going to be looking at some samples of student work and talking about how we can grade those. So hopefully that'll be useful to everybody. I'm just going to run through, first of all, so we'll start with the karakia. Sorry, Jim, do you want to start with the karakia?
Yep. Kia ora, everyone. Ki raro e te korawai kaitiaki o te ketanui a tāne. Mā te hau e puhihi te Pākehā hukahu ki o mātou waka. Te kaha tāne, tongaroa, manakitia mai e tātou katoa. I roto e te hikotangi, i te awarangi o raro ka papa, hi te orange o mātou, kia piki ake i o raui Māori, kia toi mātou, i o raui mana, hui e taike.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jim. Okay, so the plan, we've been around the introductions. I'm going to just recap again. If you've been to any of the other webinars, you'll have seen it, but I'm going to go through where to find resources and support. We're going to have a look at through some of the criteria in the standards and what the grades, what the grade levels should be. Then the main part of it is I am going to hopefully share with everybody a link to 4 pieces of student work, and I'm going to get everybody to maybe go away and have a look at those for 5 minutes yourselves, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss each one in turn and have a talk about where we got the grades for each one, and hopefully that'll help everybody to understand where the standard is. And I think there has to be a little bit of a disclaimer as well, because as always with new standards, I think everybody, including NZQA teachers, Earth and Space Science educators, we're still kind of wrapping our head around the standard. And I think it takes a year or two for it to kind of bed in and for agreement as to where the grade boundaries are for achieved merit and excellence. So there's a little bit of a disclaimer about that, but I think the more we talk about it and the more we discuss and agree, then I think the level kind of comes in time. And we'll have time for some questions at the end, and I'll encourage everybody to do a review of the session, please, as well, would be great. So just where to find resources and support. The New Zealand curriculum website's pretty good because it has all of the standards, the SLOs that the subject associations have developed. It's got some Ministry of Education developed course outlines by subject specialists, and it's got the kaupapa Māori stuff as well. The NZQA page is getting more and more stuff on it. There are a couple of, I think there's 2 exemplars of student work with a commentary. There might even be an achievement and excellence for this one, which are really useful as well. And there's external assessment stuff there as well, and there's schedules and the assessment reports too. I think that's for the external. The SN's website, which is the Earth and Space Science Educators New Zealand, has some really good resources. We've developed some course outlines over the summer that we think are pretty good. We've developed some sort of teaching and learning resources. These kind of student exemplars will be there as well. And there's lots of contacts and help there. And there's also these webinars and the subject learning outcomes and things are there as well. So just to show you where everything is. So if you have a look at the red circle up at the top, if you click on that link from the earthandspace.org.nz website, you'll get to this page, and you can see in the red circle at the bottom, that's where all the webinars and the recordings and this presentation will be as well. And you can see just above that in PS 1.1 and 1.3, that's where the course outlines and resources can be found. So I recommend you go along and have a look at that rather than everybody reinventing the wheel. And they're pretty new, so if you've got some feedback about that, please get in touch with us if you think we can improve or if anything needs to change on those, because it's, as we say, it's still pretty early days. And I would strongly encourage everybody to join Earth and Space Science Educators. Pretty sure it's free at the minute still, isn't it, Jim?
Yep.
And if you get yourself on the mailing list, anytime there's new resources and things, that'll get emailed directly to your inbox as well, which is quite useful. So on to the standard. Hopefully everybody's pretty familiar with the achievement criteria. So the main part of the standard is demonstrating understanding of human-induced change within the Earth system. And for merit, they need to explain that human-induced change. And then for excellence, they need to analyze that human-induced change. So there's a couple of key parts to that standard, which we'll just go back over. So in Earth and Space Science, we generally refer to, well, a system is a number of parts working together. And with the standard, I think the discussion is generally that you need to be talking about 2 spheres, the Earth being broken down into 4 spheres, the atmosphere, biosphere, geosphere, and hydrosphere. And as you get more towards excellence, it's more about the interactions between the spheres. And that's kind of where we lead on to in Year 12 and 13, Earth and Space Science as well. And when we talk about the interactions between the spheres, the main themes that we really talk about are the energy flows through the systems, kind of like, you know, the sunlight coming in, warming up the Earth, heating the troposphere, those kinds of things. And we talk about matter cycling. We're all familiar with the carbon cycle and the water cycle and the nitrogen cycle. So they're the interactions between the spheres, if you like. So students have to describe human-induced change. And some of the best student work that I've seen in terms of describing human-induced changes, they give some kind of evidence for that. And hopefully you can see on your screen, there's a really good image at the top left about New Zealand native forest in 1840 compared to 2001. So if a student puts that in there and says, look, here's how the forest has changed, then that provides them some evidence, even with references is great, of what the change is and how New Zealand has changed. I mean, graphs and tables are always great in science, and you can see that the bearing head CO2 changed from 1977 to 2023. Those are descriptions of the human-induced change, but obviously they need to use the science ideas in there as well. Yeah, and that must be directly or indirectly linked to human activity. So there's a couple of examples there. So increased carbon in the atmosphere, sea level rise, deforestation, and urbanization. And I'm generally finding with my students, if I'm using that sort of PEEL paragraph, it's really good because the PEEL is the point, evidence, explanation, link. And that really encourages them to put the evidence in there and give the deeper explanations as well, which is a really good way to encourage students to do that. So they also, students need to talk about the effects, which becomes implications at excellence level. So they need to describe the effects for achieved, use science ideas to explain the effects for merit, and then discuss the scientific implications at excellence level. Oh yeah, and one thing I meant to say as well is positive examples of human-induced change are really good as well. There's been a lot going on around agriculture with riparian planting, for example, in terms of how farmers are planting the median strip-sized rivers, which is preventing the runoff of fertilizers and things into the rivers, and that's reducing nitrate flow. So don't think that all the human-induced changes have to be negative. I think it's a really good practice to encourage students to say that, well, there are some good practices and things going on as well. So in terms of a science idea, I've kind of borrowed the definition of a science idea from the Science External, I think it is. So when we think about a science idea that we want the students to be using in their reports, it comes from any science body of knowledge. So it's not limited to kind of geology and things, but they can be talking about any idea from biology, chemistry, or physics. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about teaching earth and space science, is that you can actually take the science ideas from the other sciences and you can put them into a context that's kind of relevant and useful for the students. So science ideas are robust, yet tentative, so you can never really prove anything in science, but you can always prove something wrong. And the really, really big one for this standard in particular is supported by verifiable evidence. A lot of students aren't always supporting their work with verifiable evidence, but it's really good practice, and it adds so much weight to their work, to their writing, if they give that verifiable evidence in there, like the graphs and tables that they can refer to, or the data that show the change before and after is a really good way to do that. So we have a look at the achieved criteria. So you can see we're describing change within the Earth system that has resulted from human activity, which I've just given you some examples of that. So that's for explanatory note 1, and using the science ideas to describe the effects of the human-induced change within the Earth system. That's what we're looking for them to do for the achieved. So yeah, it works best if the change is described before and after, and if they give supporting evidence. Science ideas, as we said, can come from any body of knowledge, and they vary in complexity. We're really aiming for them to get ideas from kind of level 6, if at all possible. Yeah, and like aiming for that level 6 and really not pushing it beyond that, because some of the ideas can go further than that. And the general consensus is that change in 2 spheres is needed for students to be able to achieve the standard, which in the standard is kind of written as the change in the Earth system, and a system that has to be really 2 parts working together. And if you just bear with me a second, I'm going to share with everybody a link to the exemplars of student work, and then I'll get everybody to go into the achieved exemplar and have a look at that. Just bear with me until I can find it. Okay, so fingers crossed, in the chat there's a link. Hopefully everybody can access that link, and hopefully everybody can access the chat and then the link. And then if you go through, click on that link, you should be able to see 4 exemplars of student work. And if you have a look at the first one, we'll have a look at is the achieved one, which they are labeled. And what I'll do is I'll give everybody 5 minutes just to have a look at that, have a read of that. Maybe raise your hand if you're done, if you think you've had a good read of it, and then we can move on. We can have a look at why we think that is an achieved level. So Jim and Laura, can you just give me a thumbs up to show that you can actually access those? Brilliant. So Kaz, I'm going to take it from putting your hand up that you've had a look and you're happy with where the grades are. Yeah, thanks, Kaz. I actually think the majority of the good stuff is pretty much on one slide on this PowerPoint.
I think this is a classic case of a kid doing it on Google Slides when they probably should have done it on an essay format.
I'm finding that PowerPoints are limiting students because they can do a couple of good explanations on a couple of different slides, but in terms of integrating them together, they really kind of struggle with that.
I've got to admit, with my class, I didn't give them the option of Google Slides for that exact reason.
We had a few students do video presentations with it because I think the whole intent for this is that we don't restrict these kids to how they present. So I agree for PowerPoints, and I've always thought that, but I think the video, we do it on Zoom, so they were talking to us. I don't like them making a video for authenticity reasons, but doing a verbal submission worked really well, and they would just talk to a PowerPoint like this. Some of them did really well.
Is there any chance of getting an example of a video submission?
I can probably I actually teach the girl now in year 13, and it was from 2 years ago, so I can probably just ask her. She signed the NZQA thing, so I would say that would probably be okay. Is that all right, Justin?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. That'd be brilliant.
Okay, I'll email her now before I forget.
I mean, I'd love to offer more types of ways of presenting, but yeah, I've always thought with a video, they're doing the essay to maybe read from it anyway. So I don't know, ideas on how to do it differently and offer more stuff would be awesome.
I've done, I haven't done it with this one, but in the past I've done like stop motion animation we used to do What Killed the Dinosaurs for an event. I think it was a geological event. The kids absolutely loved that. Laura, is that like a limit to a 3-minute video? Is that?
This was before we didn't do the limit trial then. This is actually the girl did make a video, whereas I don't like that now. I get them to do it over Zoom with me. But like we have got a supervisor to sign that she was by herself and things like that. So I know, I understand what you're saying. She could have just typed it out, but she actually did a verbal with me today. That's just how the student likes to present her stuff. Good. So yeah,
that's correct.
Okay. I think it was longer than that though. It was a bit long. I've probably got a couple actually I can share with you. So I'll email the 2 students.
Brilliant, thanks, Laura. So I've just flicked the screen over. If you have a look, I think that there are 2 changes, or at least 2 changes described. There's a loss of native forest in the biosphere, which is supported by that really cool map, which is great. And they've talked about decreased fertility in the geosphere, and they have talked about sort of some sedimentation in the hydrosphere as well. So they've described human change, but they need to use science ideas to describe that change. And there is some science ideas with erosion, fertility loss, sedimentation, and biodiversity. And I'm always really careful when they're talking about deforestation and linking that to sort of climate change. And I mean, it does, I guess, add some carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, but I'm always really careful teaching my students that, because the main issue with a greenhouse effect is burning fossil fuels. So I try and shy away from that one. But if you have a look at that, I've kind of highlighted where there are some changes, sort of some science ideas described. So tree roots holding land together, stripped out, leaving the ground with nothing to hold it together, so away it washes. Another impact is sedimentation of water bodies, could cause irreversible damage to lakes and the nutrients, etc., etc. And they've also got the idea of disruption in the food cycle. Birds trying to get seeds of trees, or fish trying to eat berries that have fallen off trees from the Waikato River. So I think there's probably enough there to justify kind of a description of changes due to human-induced changes in two spheres.
And you don't need to name the sphere. It's implied in what they're saying. So that's one of the things that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I think if they recognize that there is a change in, for example, the hydrosphere, they don't need to explicitly state the name. There's enough for that. Okay, so the next one I'd like you to look at the sample. Sorry, before we move on, has anybody else got any comments or questions? Feel free to put some in the chat. Everybody happy with that? Okay, so same idea. We're looking for the same sort of thing. Actually, before I move on, I'll let you guys open up the second one, which is sample 2 not achieved, and then we'll have a look at that before I kind of discuss why. I think most of the samples that we've got are pretty secure grades, but I think the not achieved is at the higher end, really. They kind of nearly got there, but just not quite.
You just sending that now, are you, Justin?
It's in the same link in the Google Drive folder. You should be able to get sample 2 sea level.
Oh, true. Sorry.
Yeah, all good. Sure, somebody else is thinking the same thing. Again, if you just make a comment in the chat when you're happy to move on. Thanks, Nicole.
I can't do the chat, but I'm good.
So I think these guys, they've probably got one good science idea for describing change in the atmosphere. So if you have a look in the third paragraph.
Yeah, I mean, that third paragraph's pretty good. So
yeah.
You're wondering where they're getting some of their information from, because the rest of it is a bit ropey, and then that stands out like a sore thumb. Perhaps.
Although, Jim, we weren't able to get any samples from MOE, NZQA kind of thing because of student kind of confidentiality. So I've cobbled together ideas from several places. They may not flow that well.
Yeah, okay.
But I mean, in terms of the other ones, they've described an effect in terms of the sea level rise, but they've said sea level rise of 3.9 centimeters every year, peak. That'll be a bit of a worry if it did. I think it's more like 3.4 millimeters a year is the average sea level rise. And they have also talked about sort of burning fossil fuels to generate carbon dioxide. They haven't really explicitly described a change, and there's not really enough to demonstrate understanding in that one either. So that third paragraph is pretty good, but there's only one decent change. So I think that probably warrants a not achieved.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's some okay statements, but not in a context or a coherent flow of ideas. So we're not really sure that they've demonstrated the understanding there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll have a look at the merit. So they need to use the science ideas to explain how human-induced change affects the Earth system. And again, the Earth system being change in two spheres is the safest way to do that. So yeah, they need to use the science ideas to explain the change. And from the glossary on the MOE website, to explain is to make known the cause or detail of something. And as we saw kind of earlier in the presentation, science ideas have a specific definition, which we really want to get them moving towards that and providing evidence for it. So if you have a look at the sample number 3 in the same folder. And we went backwards and forwards on this one. Laura, I have tweaked it again since we had a chat. Hopefully I've got there this time.
Hey, I just got a reply from one of the students. I had 2 videos and she said yes. So do you want to flick me an email of where to put these videos for you?
You probably won't be able to add it to that folder, will you? No.
I can try.
If you just share me a link on Google Drive, I'll put them in that same folder. It's probably the most useful place for it.
Oh, my Google Drive's chocker. I don't.
Yeah, I don't think you can email them to me otherwise, can you?
I'll try and put them in here.
Anyway, you can put access to them that I can get to. And
because I used to have access to the Earth Space Drive and it doesn't look like I have anymore. No, I haven't.
Facebook Messenger? I don't know.
I managed to put it in that folder.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Done.
But yeah, if you can please not share it with students.
Yep, no, just a good bit for me to have a look.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then hopefully
Actually,
I'll be able to pop another one in there too.
Laura, that's a public folder. So do you want me to move that somewhere else into the, I'll put it somewhere in Earth and Space where only members can get to it.
Sweet. Yeah. So even can students get into this folder?
That's publicly linked
Yeah.
from the SN's website.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, that'll be good, Justin. Thank you. Just for the kids' privacy, I think.
I'll leave it there until the end of the webinar.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, sweet. Thank you.
Thanks, Roxanne. I think I find the ME boundary the hardest because like a good merit and the difference from the excellence, it's pretty fine sometimes, but then they get some really great excellences as well.
Yeah, I agree with that, Justin, because there's many the same explained points are on both, aren't they? But it's just how they're linked together, how they're put together, that which almost comes down to a literacy skill rather than other.
It's that an analyze word, isn't it? Really is the difference. Analysis is almost
So
a different
why-
skill altogether. Yeah.
Why didn't you think that was E? Because like they've talked about the increase in temperature and then talked about the water, like thermal expansion, basically. Are you saying because they haven't talked they haven't really explained the heating of the atmosphere?
I think it's because of the actual understanding of the interaction between the spheres is almost non-existent.
But it said that the greenhouse gases trapped it to prevent it escaping back from space, which warms up the atmosphere, and then when the temperature in the atmosphere increases, the Earth's ice caps melt, blah, blah, blah. So isn't that a link?
For excellence?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
linking, because
but-
excellence was linking the two spheres. So isn't that doing that?
But do you think that's excellent enough for that?
I mean, I'm not sure that just linking the two spheres is quite enough for excellence. It's analysis they're looking for, really, isn't it?
So the analysis of the implications?
Discussing the scientific implications of the human-induced change within the system. Have they done enough for a discussion?
So they haven't really talked about the consequences of the sea level rise and stuff.
Or the
Is that what you're
analysis,
saying? Yep.
just an
Okay. Yep.
in-depth
That's fair enough.
understanding, I think. Yeah.
So you're saying that little section there for the linking of two systems is enough, but that's the excellence falls down from the consequences not being explained. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, the wording of the standard is the discussion and the analysis. I mean, would you say that students discussed or analysed the implications?
No.
Hopefully, if we see the excellence, they'll see a difference in that. I mean, I think you're right, Laura. There is an implied link there between the two spheres, but it's only I mean, I would want that fleshed out a bit more to be kind of more explicit at excellence level, really. So Roxanne, there isn't a word limit, but a word recommendation of about 800 words. I think they started in the early renditions. They were talking about word limits for year like level 1, 2, and 3, but they've moved back from that. And there is no word limit. How much do you want to mark? I've just finished science 1.2, and I'm finding it really hard to do science 1.2 in less than 1,500 words, which is an awful lot of marking. But I think with this one, I think good practice. I always give word limits because I think it makes the students' writing better, more concise, more scientific, really. So I always use word limits. I like them, but in terms of the standards, there isn't any.
Yeah, I think we've been finding that the kids sort of at that excellence level are struggling at the 800. They're sort of getting to about the 1,000.
Mm-hmm. I'd be encouraging the 800. Good writing
Just to
practice.
support that, Justin, it's part of the aim of the word limits. It was about making the workload manageable for teachers and students, and encouraging the succinctness rather than the shotgun approach, rather than a student writing absolutely everything they know and you trying to pick out the achieved merit and excellent bits from the sea of words. It was trying to encourage those succinct answers or the more succinct presentations. So,
Yeah, we
I
got
generally have the-
students getting E from one page. Like when we did it, because we have a we use Writer's Toolbox that makes them more succinct, and you know, had checkpoint feedback. You need to cut your word, because we were doing that word limit trial too, and we had some good 1 pages.
We've started using Writer's Toolbox this year as well. It's fantastic for improving the
Yeah.
writing.
So what's that? Sorry, Writer's Toolbox.
Writer's Toolbox. I think it's $10 a student, isn't it? Something like that. Although it's got a very heavy essay, social sciences slant and creative writing slant, so you've got to be careful, a little bit careful using it with sciences.
Okay.
We use it a lot. We use the lawyer paragraph a lot.
Yeah, and there's compare and contrast in there as well, and a few other.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, worth having a look. Now, question, because we didn't give any feedback to students once they started their essay. Is that a rule that our HOD gave, or is that a general no guidance once they start the essay?
Anybody want to take that
we're
one?
we're giving
not sure.
checkpoint feedback as part of our collection of evidence. So I guess we always have, and as I understood it, it only seems to be the 1.3 that you were not, that was fully hands off. But Rachel, do you know?
I'm just double checking this, the conditions of assessment, because they're all a little bit different amongst different standards sometimes.
This
Roxanne,
one
I think
is,
I'd agree with you and Laura. I think I would tend to give generalized feedback during an internal, but I know the CARs are very different because they've got very specific external assessment conditions.
mm,
It says general feedback in this
Yeah.
thing.
general feedback, and that, what does that mean? But yeah, I mean it in some things like the 1.2, it precludes a template that tells them what factors to write about, you know, what quantities to write about, that sort of thing. That's how it goes. So I guess you're.
So for this, general feedback would be, hey, look, you need to look at the interaction of the spheres a bit closer, or
Have you described the change well enough?
Yeah.
I just put the wording in the chat. So you can say this, you might need a bit more work here, or maybe proofread that bit. You know, your own teacher judgment comes into there, as well as your school policies, so long as you're being consistent within your school. And different schools will have different ways of managing their assessment tasks, but
the thing is, like, because this is quite important, that if I'm not giving feedback which hinders my students, but other schools are giving general feedback, then we got to make sure that the policy is as consistent as possible across the MOTU rather than a department policy.
Yeah, as a principal's nominee, Jim, I think I can say that's really hard to manage because there's always variation between teachers within a school, let alone between schools.
Yeah,
it's quite challenging, isn't it?
Yeah, but
okay.
I mean, certainly my feedback to HOD will be that general feedback is allowed in this assessment.
Yeah, cool. I think that's correct. So if we have a look at the screen, the presentation again. So science ideas about combustion changing the carbon cycle is used to explain adding carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. And there's a subsequent change in the hydrosphere of melting ice caps, coastal flooding, explaining the greenhouse effect. I don't think that's changed. So if we have a look at the next one, this kind of highlights where I think they've got some good merit points. And like we were talking before, there is an implicit link between temperature change leading onto the ice caps melting and thermal expansion, I guess. But I'd want to see more in terms of an analysis and a discussion. I don't think they really made that, although I say probably this might be a high merit. But this is the one that I'm finding most challenging, is that merit excellence boundary. Like making a merit that's not an excellence is actually quite tricky. So I think that'll come more clear over time. So is it Bitha? Yeah, we were just talking about the Bitha. Yeah, we can give generalized feedback is what the standard conditions are saying. We can give generalized, have you explained the change sufficiently, or is your science idea deep enough, but
Yeah.
not specifically telling them what the science idea is, for example.
Yeah. Cool. So I put a question on there earlier about sort of holistic, which is, I guess, the get out of the jail card for those merit excellence borderlines, isn't it? So are we still following holistic or is it sort of, nah, that's out the window now?
I've always struggled with the holistic thing, because if they don't meet the criteria in the standard, where does the holistic come from? I kind of struggle with that sometimes.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but there's already on that last merit one a couple of debates you could have around that merit or excellence.
I
A
think
lot of the marking schedules online have got, and the very bottom line is that your overall judgment, it does come down to a teacher judgment of what the grades should be. So there is, for those borderline ones, there is that aspect, or that is where you go and talk to a colleague, or flick an email out on your Facebook chat or whatever and say, I've got this one that I'm just not sure about, can anyone help me with this? Because there was always one who's just, is it or is it not? And I wouldn't say necessarily send those for moderation this year, but next year maybe you would, as you get finer on your boundaries.
I don't think we need to be too worried about moderation this year. I mean, moderation is just going to be feedback to us as teachers. It's not going to change our student grades, so we shouldn't be stressing about that because it's all pretty new. But I mean, especially if you're on your own in the school, or if you are struggling to get some help with moderation, then Earth and Space Educators has a network of regional reps, and we've all done some pretty good work around these two standards over the summer and last year. So I would recommend reaching out to Earth and Space Science Educators. Just email any of the addresses on there, and I think the regional reps are listed on there as well. So find out who's in your region, click them an email, and they're always willing to help out with moderation. So any other questions about, I think the holistic comment as well, I was just going to say, I think when you're thinking about analyze and discuss, I mean, you have to take a step back and look at the whole picture and think, have they got the depth to warrant a discussion or an analysis? I think that's definitely, when you come to excellence, you have to mark it holistically, really. So if everybody wants to have a look, I've put on a definition of analyze from, again, the glossary on the NCA website. And that's to examine the nature or structure of something, especially by separating it into parts. Well, we need to be talking about two spheres, but I think we also need to be talking about how those two spheres are integrated in order to understand it. And I think just on the whole, we're looking for a greater depth of explanation and a greater depth of link between the spheres, whereas I think that one was only kind of implicit in the merit. I'd be looking for a bit more depth and links from that. So we have a look at the last one, the excellence, and see what you think. Thanks, Kaz. Yeah, there's some good stuff in there, isn't there? And it's good writing as well, as you say, Jim. I think it's high quality writing, really. Thanks, Kaz.
Yeah, certainly very classic how you can do it in those word limits.
So there's definitely a clear flow between the ideas, showing those links between the spheres in this one. I think the thing for me that this one's missing is a really good explicit explanation of the change with some evidence. You know, putting in some evidence of it was before this, or this is how much the pH of the ocean's changed, would really take it to the next level. Yeah, Vitha, I don't think we have to expect that, Vitha, but I think it gives it much more weight, and it makes the report much higher quality if there is some evidence in there that they can refer to. But they can do it without that. And I don't think many students have been doing that very well in terms of using that evidence. But I think there's a really good explanation of sort of acid rain. That's a really good science idea that's linked into changes in the hydrosphere. And I think the two subsequent changes are the hydrosphere, and then they're also talking about the biosphere or the geosphere. So I think one good one, and then there's two that are pretty good. But the main thing bringing in the analysis is that they're all kind of linked together, and they're kind of discussing those impacts and how they link pretty well. So I've got some notes on there. So, I mean, this makes the water more acidic, I think, is the only explicit change they've described. But there's a lot of implicit changes in there that they're kind of referring to and discussing.
Can we show this these exemplars to our department?
Absolutely. They're in a public space.
Yeah.
There's no permission issues with them at all. The only issue is students getting hold of them and copying them, I guess.
Ours are finished now, so that won't happen.
Done and dusted. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully they'll be a useful resource, because it's good to get these out there. It's been hard to source actual student work that we can publish, because there's all the privacy issues around that, I guess. Any other thoughts or comments around that? I think when you look at that and then you compare it back to the merit, like it's certainly higher quality kind of discussion and links between them.
Yep.
Okay.
I think there's science and it could be a lot meatier. Like I think that's pretty. I think that would be a lowie, because it's pretty pithy science to me, to be fair. Compared to the merit one, where you had a few more, what I would say, deeper science ideas, but that's just me. I think that those two examples are quite, if you got them to moderate, you would possibly agree with whatever the mark was, whether it be high M or low E.
Yeah.
They're very borderline, aren't they?
I'm going to get this right one day, Laura, because the first exemplars I used with the Earth and Space educators was like an amazing E. It was way too high. I remember Jim commenting on that one, and this one's more of the borderline. So I think the third one might get there. But yeah, I mean, I would still give this an E.
It's hard, eh? Yeah. 100%.
Especially with the new. I think there's quite a lot of ambiguity in the standard, and I think that will kind of become clearer with time when we agree with it, really. So yeah. But yeah, I agree with you, and I think that's what I'm saying as well, that more evidence, more data, I think that would all lend weight to it and improve those explanations as well.
And I think you just nailed it then, that maybe that is the difference with the excellence, that they are, or they have to use evidence to back up their argument.
Well, it has to be analysis, doesn't it, and discussion. Yeah. Okay. Are there any more general questions, thoughts, comments? Please, can everybody make sure they go on to the evaluation, which I will send out with this PowerPoint to everybody that's showed up tonight. And it's also available at that Earth and Space Science Educators link. So actually, I might be able to put the link into the chat before anybody takes off anywhere. Just give me a second.
Okay, so feel free to jump in with a question if you've got your hands up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just see someone's put there about diagrams. So when we were doing fossil fuels, and they had really good diagrams to show that what was happening in the atmosphere. So those were really good. That then led on to the other ones, and I guess that's making the thing shorter too and less marking.
Yeah, that's why like that example of the deforestation at the start as well, just showing that and then talking about it is the best way that they can show what the change is, and then just linking it to human-induced and science ideas, really, isn't it? So there's the link for the feedback form. I'd be really appreciate if you could do that before you guys take off. And hang on a second, where are we? And don't know if the video will work. Just we'll finish off with the karakia if there's questions. Okay, and I shall. Thanks for coming, everyone. And yeah, the recording will be on the Earth and Space Science Educators website. And if you've got any questions, just get in touch with me or somebody at Earth and Space Science Educators, and everybody's more than happy to help. And we've got some resourcing from Ministry of Education to be able to support teachers with the teaching of these standards as well. So don't be afraid to kind of get in touch with us. And thanks everybody for coming.
That was great. Thank you.